We'll open the meeting. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, kia makina kina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai. E hiake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihe moriora. So good morning and welcome to our Finance and Performance Committee meeting. This meeting is set down to end at midday at the latest, so we're going to need to be remaining reasonably disciplined around the timing of the items on the agenda today. So moving to item 1, apologies. I've got an apology for an early departure from Sarah Templeton. No other apologies noted. I'm happy to move that. Jake McClellan's happy to second. All those in favour say aye. Against, that's carried. Declarations of interest, Tim Scandrus in respect of item 11. No other declarations noted. If anything becomes apparent as we move through the meeting, please make it known. Confirmation of previous minutes, item 3. I'm happy to move that the minutes of the meeting of the 3rd of September be confirmed. Sam will second. All those in favour say aye. Against, that's carried. Public forum. There are no public forum presentations this morning. Item 5, deputations by appointment. There are none. Item 6, presentation of petitions. There are none. So that brings us to item 7, the performance exceptions report. And we've got Peter to present. Is Peter here? We're probably moving a little bit faster than he was expecting. Let's see whether he is. Otherwise, we could do item 8 first and come back to item 7. All right, let's move to item 8 then first, and if somebody can let Peter know that we need him for item 7. But Ruth, you're here. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the table.
Thanks.
And maybe you'd like to make some introductory remarks on the capital project performance report.
Good morning. Thank you. Alrighty, so you have the capital project performance report in front of you. This is data captured at the 20th of August. So at that point in time, we had a current forecast of 544 against 501 budget. So I just want to make some comments around the deliverability of that budget, as well as the current financial year plan and the forecasts, which you'll see from page 37 to page 38. So we remain focused on delivering as close as possible to that core program of 400 million that you signed off last financial year for this year, which excludes Metro Sport and multi-use arena. I think at the moment we're in quite a good position to be able to do that. We have 306 projects in construction. Those projects are forecasting 344 million this financial year alone. So we are almost at the 400 million just with projects in construction. That is where we spend the majority on our projects. We have another 28 projects, which is forecasting 25 mil at the moment, that are currently in procurement. So those projects are going to start in construction once we have tendered them out. We have externally funded projects, as you know, from our shovel ready, from the Crown and also from our water reform. They, this year, sit within the 400 million cap, so our core program, and those projects have been fast-tracked this year, and we have 39 mil forecast on the shovel ready, as well as 15 million forecast on the water reform for delivery this financial year. So you can see that we are in quite a good position, I think, in order to deliver that 400 mil. Our spend to date is 36 against a forecast of 42. So we have started the financial year a little bit behind our plan, and that does mean we do need some additional effort to kind of catch up on that loss. I'll speak to the August spend first. We spent 2 million less than our August forecast. So there's two things that have to happen to get spend in our system. Firstly, the work has to be completed, and then secondly, the work has to be billed. So the work has been completed, we just haven't got the bill yet. That 2 million relates to our downstream effects. It's progressing well, and it's on track to be completed. In terms of July actuals, there is always a low spend in July because we accrue that work in June. So the spend falls on the right financial year. So July is always low. As you can see in the graph, we didn't actually achieve even the forecast in July, so it does put us slightly behind, but we are working to recover that spend. On page 39, you'll see that there's a graph that's providing visibility of our forecast for future months against budget, and there are some high future forecasts. So I just want to provide a little bit of commentary around the exceptional months. In December, we are forecasting 45 mil. We've got two major projects that are forecasting 5 million that month, our Metro Sport project and our road lighting LED project. The road lighting spend relates to materials only, so we're on track to spend that. And then Metro, which is a high component of our December, January and April forecasts, all rely on the forecasts that we get from Otakaro because they are the ones that are delivering this program of work. We are talking to Otakaro at the moment around their program to deliver because, as you know, there have been impacts relating to COVID. In terms of January, which is higher than our previous Januaries, we've got 13 million that's wound up in the Metro multi-use and Te Po Linwood Pool, which is progressing well. And we have a Takaro Avon River corridor with a 4.5 million forecast in that month. That will need to be rephased. It will be delivered this financial year, and we are tendering for those footbridges in November this year, so the spend will be this year. April. We're forecasting 70 million that month, so quite high. 15 million of that is tied up with land purchase only. 10 million again for Metro, Te Po and multi-use arena. And then we've got a majority of the rest of the forecast wound up in the shovel-ready MCR projects. So we've got 4 in construction at that point, and they see around 2 million spend per month. So in future reports to this committee, we will provide additional commentary underneath that graph that provides you with some information around what makes up those monthly forecasts. Moving to page 40, our COVID-19 cost impacts. So you'll see that the highlighted cells are the ones that have been resolved since previously reported. We have now resolved the majority of them. We just have 15 claims remaining out of the total of the 46 claims, and we will still provide you the final settled values at this committee once negotiations are complete. Page 42 to 44, you'll see the top 10 carry forwards and the top 10 bringbacks. I've spoken to deliverability of the current forecast already. It mentioned at last committee we were going to provide you an additional report in relation to external funded projects, and so you'll see that that has been provided. Rather than duplicating the information in the MCR reports and also the external funded, the MCR sections that are not part of shovel ready are still within that MCR report. So I'll take the watch list, the MCR and external funded project reports as read, and I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you. So thanks for highlighting some of those areas in the report that I think perhaps otherwise would have provoked some questions. So thanks very much indeed for that. And for what once again is a very clear report that I think points out the areas that we should be having interest in very well. So that's good. So looking at the overall budget and forecast figures, what are we currently projecting? I mean, we've got a clear focus, obviously, at the moment on LTP development, and that means that we've got a strong interest in what the carry forward at the end of this financial year into year one of the new LTP would look like. What are we currently expecting that to be forecast as? What carry forward are we expecting?
At the moment, our project managers are forecasting a bring back, so to spend more this financial year than what we have budgeted. As you know, in previous years, this is how it usually happens. At the start of the financial year, we have a high bring back, and you see every single month that that decreases and ends up being a carry forward by the end of the financial year.
I guess that's the reason for my question.
That's right,
because,
exactly.
You know,
so I
at
understand the reason for your question.
Yeah.
So the difference is this financial year is that we have reduced our capital program to match what we have delivered in the past. We have delivered on average more than 400 million in the last 3 financial years, just over 400 million. We delivered 388 million last financial year despite COVID lockdown and not being able to complete our construction. We have some very strong project steering groups in place to review forecasts, to challenge deliverability of our projects, And I believe that we're in a good position to get as close to that 400 million this financial year as we can. So I can't put a number on a carry forward, but our goal is to achieve as close to that 400 mil, and I think we're in a good position to do that at present.
Okay. So, Dawn, you'd like to make a further comment?
If you don't mind, Chair.
Indeed.
Ever the optimist, and quite rightly so. My experience over many, many years goes, if you're doing very, very well, then you'd look at a carryover of around 10% or below. So for us, that would be 40 million.
40 million.
If we achieve that and push it further down, I will be a very happy Chief Exec. Any officer who says that it's zero is not a reality. No capital programme ever delivers in the nature of how you expect it to, simply because of what you're doing. So
Our goal is to achieve as close to 400 mil as possible.
Yeah.
So I'm pleased to hear the answer to that question. I mean, deliverability has been a strong focus for many years, and if we can achieve the kind of numbers that we're talking about, realising that they're forecasts and we're still early in the year, we will be doing well, and we certainly will be doing better than we've done in previous years. So this is all encouraging. Looking at the delivery of the capital programme in terms of the headline number, the 400 million, all well and good, because that's the quantum that we set out to deliver. Will the projects that have been delivered within that 400 million to achieve it be the same projects that we prioritised for inclusion in the 400 million that we put forward when we approved the annual plan, or will there be a significant degree of substitution?
I think it's a fair assumption to believe that the projects that we have approved this financial year are delivered to their best ability and are progressed. As you know, there are multiple reasons for delays on projects, and so some of those projects may be delayed. At that point, obviously, with delays, budgets move out, forecasts move out, and with that, we take the opportunity to try and identify projects that are in the current backlog that may just be in plan that we can accelerate. So they are projects that have been approved, but we may not have planned to deliver them as fast as we had initially anticipated in the original annual plan.
Excellent. So really this is about finding the balance between delivering the capital programme as originally intended,
Yes.
but when we're not able to do that for very practical reasons of
Yes.
deliverability, then we concentrate on delivering to quantum and really focusing on continuing a pipeline of work and keeping up momentum. I guess there's a concern in there for me that as governors we need to make sure that we've got oversight to the right degree of substitutions and changes to what we originally agreed, so that we can be comfortable with that, particularly given the focus on the makeup of the capital programme to the 400 million quantum in the beginning. So, Diane, I don't know whether this is something that you might have a comment on?
I do know there is some work underway, and I agree with you. It is something we have looked at to make sure that there is visibility if there's a substitution, that it does come back to this committee.
Yeah. All right. Can I signal that this will likely be an area of focus in future meetings? And the more it can be highlighted in these reports, the better. And my understanding is that there's a briefing planned at some point in the near future to address exactly the issues that I've raised, which is great. All right. Thank you. Moving to further questions, Yanni and then Jimmy.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the Metro Sports, I feel like we don't really have enough information to understand what the risks are. Is there any more detailed information that we've got? We've just got the time status, and the comments just basically say delays due to slower progress than current construction program and COVID-19. But is there any issues with the land there? Is there any more detail you can give us on what the actual time delays are and what they're based on?
So the time delays are the COVID-19 shutdown period, the lockdown period that occurred, and the lack of activity that occurred on site. The subsequent delays with structural steel and structural steel supply. They're using Merthyr Pool. The Merthyr Pools are on site. There are issues with the so when you install a Merthyr Pool, or any pool for that matter, whether it's Natari or Merthyr, Notario out of the States. To get sign-off on the installation of those, you require the people that manufacture the pools and install the pools from the States come over and give you a tick to say that you've installed it correctly. And Merthyr no different. Merthyr are from Italy. So one of the issues they're facing at the moment is bringing those individuals into the country. They're working very hard with MB and the ministries to ensure that those people do come into the country at the right time. It's not impacting the programme yet. The issues they face, the detail of issue is around the quantum of cost, and the cost impacts from CPB, which is a contractually closed world to us at the moment, because we're a pay only and we pay on productivity and steel arriving on site. That is not known to us at the moment, but we know that we have Mark Noonan who sits across this from our unit, and Mark is, as you know, is very trustworthy with the financials, and Mark is over what they're doing at the moment and trying to get some clarity on what the next steps are. There is a delay, and that cost delay is what's under analysis at the moment. So,
Is there any issue with the land?
no, not that we're aware of, no.
Right. Just the other question I had was, I guess what I'm struggling to understand on some of these, like we've got the Eastgate PT project, which you're saying is at risk because it's over budget. So it says the scheme cost estimates indicate preferred option is over budget. Is that, like for some projects we seem to get a report come back and say we need the money to deliver this project. Others we get told it gets value engineered and redesigned. I'm just trying to understand when something would come back to us for additional money to meet what we'd already approved as a council.
Lynette.
I think the question is relating to the public transport hub grant.
I mean, it's
Well,
both.
I can talk to the Linwood hub, but
Yeah.
the general question depends on the size of the change and the quantum of the change, because that's dealt with through staff delegations as we've got. I know we discussed it, but with that one, it is a. I have talked to the project manager. They are currently forecasting a potential overrun, but we don't have a tender in yet. So it's the chicken and egg situation of we don't actually know how much something's going to cost until we've got a cost in for it. So we're doing an assessment at the moment on constructability, looking at we are rerunning our estimate, so that was a scheme estimate back at scheme stage. We're running a final design estimate at the moment, so a pre-tender estimate before we go out to tender. If we are able to, if it is a small overrun and we're able to find that within staff delegations and within the wider PT program, we look to achieve that.
So what's the reporting back to us about how that's progressing?
In line with,
Will we get like a memo that says we've changed design elements, or will we get an update on the budget?
the project, and this happens with any project, if it comes in under budget and we have to redesign, fundamental changes that mean that the scheme is different to what you approved or the community board approved, we will have to go back and get community board or council approval before we move that forward. And one of those options will be either to put more budget on to deliver the original scope or to not. If we can make minor tweaks in how it's constructed, or find value in the costings in the sense of combining other works, so you get a bigger tender, you actually save money, the contractors can do more for the money, then we look to do that as well. So there's multiple ways that we do it, but we are being upfront and honest and saying at the moment, on the scheme that we had in, our rough order cost estimates are showing that we could be over budget. Yeah. We're working to try and find ways to.
And I know with this one, we were also doing the wastewater, weren't we, down Linwood Ave? Was it stormwater? Yes. So we had to do quite a big replacement.
Yes.
Is that, it's not obviously on the watch list, but is that something that we should connect to this project so we can see the...
That's not on the watch list.
Yeah.
That project's not on the watch list anyway.
But that would have
risk list,
timing issues. I mean, it's aligned to this project, isn't it? So, you know, it would maybe good to just have visibility of that as well. Just the final question I had was on Charlesworth Drain. Did we have it says, so it's just on page 12, oh sorry, page 48, 12 of the sheet. So it says delays are due to reprioritization as part of the 21 annual plan post-COVID. So is there been a decision by us to delay that? And again, I mean, it's a bit like the other one. Obviously, this is an issue that's been raised repeatedly with us, with deputations to council and a work program that we understand. I'm just trying to understand like how much at risk is that project and what we would need to do to actually get it done rather than have it delayed. And I don't quite understand where the decision making sits around that.
Around
Around the reprioritisation.
Yep, it's around the repairing Charlesworth Drain, not significantly improving the upstream flooding around Maces Road and Flip Out. So therefore it's moved to a lower priority to be carried out next year, to replace with sheet pile rather than timber drain. We've had some challenges around stakeholder engagement, which much of this time has been spent dealing with, as well as redesigning.
What I don't understand is it being delayed because of budget, or is it being delayed simply because of other issues in terms of the access and the design?
Yeah, it's not due to budget, it's down to issues with access and design.
All right, thank you. Jimmy.
One question. Sorry. On page 43, the major cycleway South Express section temporary to Gilbert's 1A, and staff mentioned $1.4 million will be carried forward. Original is $3.5 million, but I'm particularly concerned because the Waterloo Road, heavy trucks, safety issue, and also intersection of Gilbert's Waterloo Road, Murphy Street, pedestrian and the cyclist crossing, the safety issue will be the most critical. Start all aware of this kind of situation. My view, we need to speed up the progress to build up this major cycleway, this section, and also based on the schedule, from Gilbert's to Paparua Reserve will be opening in June 2021. From Temperton to Gilbert's will be opening in March of 22. If we carry forward, I'm concerned whether this progress will be delayed, further delayed. This is my particular concern. And also, when the intersection of Gilbert's, Murphy Street, Waterloo Road, this section, pedestrian cyclist crossing safety facility will be open.
So at the last meeting, we talked about the fact that South Express is affected because and the scheduling for South Express is affected because it's a shovel-ready project, and we were going to update. I think it was Councillor Kewen's question. We were going to update the delivery dates. If you go to page 56, page 56 has the South Express delivery profile on 4, and we have simplified the number of sections of the routes that are going. So section 1 and 2 are the NZTA council funded sections, and section 3 is section 3 is the council funded ones. We are delivering slightly behind schedule to deliver and we've talked about this before, the delivery for this route is going from the city out towards Templeton. The sections out to Buchanan's Road are being delivered by November 22, and from High out to Jones Road by April of 22. So they're coming back together. Does that make sense out the back end? So we have changed and rescheduled that.
I didn't see the section between the Templeton to the Gilbert's, between the Gilbert's to the Paparua, between the Paparua
all part
I didn't see here.
That's all part of High to Jones Road, is my understanding. That's the whole section along that piece. So we've shuffled the sections because they didn't make sense for delivery.
Maybe there's some more detailed information could be provided to Councillor Chen offline if that's what's needed to answer his question specifically.
Yeah, because every section you did have budget, you did a time schedule, you know, you did an opening date.
Yes,
That's based
yeah.
on your previous, even in the 12th of August, the finance and the performance, the
And we've
report. But now still,
Yeah.
you know, I didn't see the.
And we've reset the schedule to meet the timeline for the shovel-ready projects.
But you need to
What also
consistent.
needs to happen is we need to reflect the new delivery plan that Lynette has agreed with the Crown in the system that we've got so that it's consistent. So you'll actually see what projects we're actually delivering. At the moment, it's a little bit confusing in this report because the sections are named one way in the external funded report and they're named another way in the carry forward table. So we need to reflect that in the system.
Is there something that could be put together, maybe by way of
Yes.
an email or a really simple memo, possibly including a map that would clarify the answer to the question?
But importantly, ladies, if we have two different names for the same scheme, then please put one name down so we don't have confusion.
Done.
Okay.
Yeah, I think probably an offline conversation with Jimmy and a simple email or memo or maybe even just a map might be enough to resolve it. All right, that's great. If we do that, Jimmy, that'll solve your problem?
Not solve my problem.
It should do. I think it will.
Every time it's changing. It's my particular concern.
Let's
Every
get some
time
clear
it's
information to you and let's see whether that's
Yeah.
sufficient.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Chair. Thank you.
Pauline.
Thank you. On page 47, referring to the biogas storage upgrade at the wastewater treatment plant, I tend to bring the wastewater treatment plant up quite a bit, but it's very, very red and very risky. So I'm wondering, what is that biogas for? Is that the one that runs the plant, or is that some of the biogas that supplies this building? Noting that the Burwood landfill biogas is running out as well. So are they connected at all?
Yes and no. So this is biogas, not landfill gas. So it's the gas coming out of the digesters at the wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah.
And we've run into some design problems. So we've gone back to the drawing board. We've had a bit of a peer review of the design work that was done. We've gone back to the drawing board to integrate the design of the biogas storage facility with an overall energy plan for the plant. And that work's almost complete, and then we'll go back into the design for the biogas facility itself. So the biogas facility, if you'll recall, was it's like a massive balloon that fills up with the biogas, and then as we use it, it drops down again to enable us to store it and use it at the best time.
So we use it to run the plant itself?
We use it to run the plant, that's correct.
And so what's the risk? Is there a risk of it running out before we do these improvement works?
No, the biogas is available. The problem at the moment is that sometimes we have to flare it because we can't use it.
Oh, well, that's not very good, is it?
That's
So
true.
do we have a timeline at all around this?
We will develop a new timeline now that we've finished the peer review of the design and we've got an overall a sort of strategic use of biogas at the plant. We've got a new plan for that, and yeah, we can give you a new timeline for that.
But have we got any idea? Because currently it's just on hold. That could be, I mean, when will we know?
The construction is on hold because we have to now go back to the design work. So
Yeah.
as soon as we know, I can get you an update from Adam.
I think it would be quite good to get a memo around that if we could, because I think it's quite important.
If we can get the information circulated, that would be excellent. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Alan.
Aaron.
Just on the biogas, sorry, Hallie, are you using that to as a heater, or are you turning it to electricity?
No, we're using it directly as the energy. I mean, most of it is for drying biosolids.
Yes, so it's just used purely as heat.
Yes.
So are you flaring very often, and would it be worth putting in an exchanger to electricity and then pumping it back into the grid, or just not viable?
But the best thing to do is put in the storage facility. That's what so that we can use it on site.
Right.
And then you don't lose energy in the conversion to electricity.
Yeah, okay, cool, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we've got a recommendation in front of us to receive the information in the Capital Project Performance, Capital Watch List, Major Cycleways and Externally Funded Projects report for this period, which I'm happy to move. Sam will second. Is there any debate? All those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Now let's move back to the Performance Exceptions Report for August 2020. Peter, thanks for joining us this morning. Welcome to the table. Have you got any opening remarks on this report?
Well, the first one's an apology for the timing mistake earlier. That was my fault. I'm sorry about that.
You're here now. That's the important thing.
Look, this is the high-level performance view. It's not an operational line-by-line. We've started the year well in the sense that results are up from August, which is against the normal trend, the annual trend. We're sitting just above the ELT target at 87% delivery for levels of service. That's scattered across a mix of services. There's no particular cluster. There's a few general trends around roads, parks and water supply, which is normal and we expect that. We feel that this is a realistic result because we're using the same approach we did last year, which is that if a level of service wasn't met last year, it starts off as red until there's evidence to the contrary. So we don't hit reset and simply assume optimism will apply. Hope is not a strategy. If we missed something in July, we're looking for evidence of improvement before we turn it green. So I think this is a realistic result. Watchlist capital projects are sitting around 83 and 84 respectively for watchlist and major cycleways. That's a bit short of the ELT target of 90%, but it's still quite high. There's an exception report attached which gives the detail, but look, that's actually the high-level view, and we do have the managers here to speak to the levels of service exceptions if needed. The business rule that the Chair developed is that if we can supply a quick response on the spot, that's fine. If not, we'll report back rather than kill the committee's time. There are also the exceptions around watchlist projects, but the bottom line of this is reasonably steady for this time of year and trending upward a little rather than downward, which is a positive. So there's a little more to add, unless you want to go into specific levels of service or project exceptions.
Let's take any questions, if indeed there are any. Just noting your point, Peter, that this is a high-level summary, it's a high-level report, and if the questions are detailed matters that are for managers to answer and we haven't got the managers in the room, that may then result in a written answer after the meeting, which can be circulated to everybody. Now, just one question from me, a more general question to start off with. You say that the results are up compared to what they normally would be at this time of year. Do we read anything into that, or is there anything in particular driving that? You mentioned that you think the result is realistic, so obviously it's something that we can take as part of that realistic result. Is there anything that we should be reading differently than what we're seeing into that?
Not really. I mean, some guesstimates. We had a mild winter. There was no flooding. So all the normal things that would come with seasonality, probably we got off pretty lightly this year. So that might account. It's only a little up, but the main thing is we normally start with a very optimistic August and start to trend slowly down. We've started with August and the trend is slightly up. So it's not hugely statistically significant, but it's better than going the other way.
Yeah, I mean, it is a move in the right direction, and that's certainly the thing to highlight.
There's probably just some good housekeeping behind that focus and a good winter.
Oh, well, that's good to hear, and long may it continue. Excellent.
I think you put that in the context of on the back of COVID as well.
Yeah. All right. Any further questions on this? Yanni?
Thank you. I was particularly interested in the water supply, and what I don't seem to be able to see in here is in terms of the number of complaints.
Can we get a page number or reference?
24. And 25. So what I'm trying to understand, and I did put a question through because I got a memo from last month's meeting, but it didn't really answer the question, and that is how many complaints are we getting? And then it did answer that, but it doesn't tell me the time frame of resolving those complaints. And I know previously we had, I think, for urgent water response, we had something like within 24 hours or 1 day, and then for non-urgent, I think we had 3 days or something. But I just wanted to get a sense of what our actual levels of service are in terms of responding to people that ring up about water leaks, and how we're meeting those, or if we're not meeting those, what the current timeframes are for resolving.
I'll have to come back to you on that then. At the moment, we are meeting those timeframes, but what you're asking is the trends over the last 6 months as well? Is that what you're wanting to look at?
No, I guess I was more interested in the well, the trends would be useful. I've got a lot of the statistics. We got a really good memo last year on what was being done, and it seemed to indicate that we were on top of the problem. What I don't quite understand is whether that problem is actually being gotten on top of, or whether it's actually getting worse again, and we need to do other stuff to respond.
Okay. Well, there's two things there. Yes, there is a continuing trend of a large number of leaks. So that trend of a large number of leaks that we need to attend to in the water supply is continuing. You will have noted that in the exceptions report, there was some increase in the reactive maintenance budget, particularly around water meters. That's one of the main mechanisms by which we're trying to address that. So that's simply if we get called to a leak at a water meter, it's often on the connections on either side of that water meter. If the whole water meter assembly and those connections are in poor condition, rather than repairing the leak, we are replacing the meter and the connections so that we don't get called back a second, third and fourth time. So that is one of the big things that's going on. So that work is going on. Although the other thing that is increasing the trends in terms of call-outs is the backflow work. So we have been sending out letters to all of our commercial connections, so it's about 8,500 commercial connections, and we're getting a lot of requests back to attend to those connections as people go out and have a look at them.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of trends in there, but we can give you an update.
I think just getting the memo that we got was pretty good, but it's just kind of updating it to reflect the information we got in last year's memo, so that we can see in terms of responsiveness what's happening.
And that's particularly water supply?
Water supply, yeah. And there's a number of ones in here where we're still waiting for the annual result, but they've been flagged. And just a kind of general question around the kind of completion. So, I mean, it's not just for water. I think there's another comment around roads and footpaths, around number of complaints. And I'm just like, when I've put CSRs in, I'm quite surprised to get correspondence back that says, good news, your job has been completed or is in action. And so I don't quite know how we're tracking jobs that are being requested have been actually done versus ones that are actually been requested and the request has been passed on but the work hasn't been done. And so I just, from a lot of these things in terms of how we're monitoring, we've got issues with IT, the hybrid system, but I just wanted to kind of understand the confidence we can have that things aren't just being passed on to the contractor labelled as complete versus the work actually being done itself.
I think that's an overall level of service question rather than one for Helen.
Yeah.
Look, there are actually very few levels of service that talk about CSR response rates. So when you say you don't see them here, it may be because they don't exist. There's an overall CSR response figure that comes out of, I believe, customer services.
Right.
But in terms of split by major business line, like water or transport, there are relatively few that are cut that way. So maybe you're looking for something that isn't actually a level of service.
Oh, just if you look at Parks and Foreshore on page 28, it says 100% of CSRs addressed within priority timeframes, and it goes target not achievable, no actual remediation can be applied in case blah blah blah, and it goes on. So
I'm just saying that's not consistent across all the major services. Parks have chosen to target that and be responsive around that, but that's not necessarily the case with all the big services.
Can I ask that Sarah comes down and just gives an overall comment as well, please?
Good morning. So in relation to hybris, there is, as you rightly point out, Yanni, there is work being done on the notifications. So when something gets placed on our work program, you do get a generic notification saying, good news, it's been placed on our scheduled work. But you then don't actually understand, well, how long is it going to take to get fixed? So there is a review of our hybris system where we're looking to address that work's underway. In relation to being able to see service requests, even if they're not showing in individual activity plans as levels of service, we can provide reporting based on a service request. So there is a very detailed report that can show when we received it and how it's tracking in relation to being completed. That information is available, not necessarily tied into a individual level of service, but across the whole gambit of service requests that we get in through council, we can provide that reporting.
So when people put a job in and they get like a text that says good news, job X has been completed or has been added to our schedule over the coming weeks,
Yes.
are we able to distinguish between jobs that have actually been completed versus ones that have been put into the schedule?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I talked about the work that we're doing in relation to our hybrid system. So it
Right.
was a minimal viable product that we put into place. There is a range of statuses that we can actually turn on that will give more meaningful
And when is that
information.
likely to happen?
The anticipated date is by February next year. So some work will be done by December, particularly in our world of transport, because it is a priority for us, and then further work by February next year.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Sam, you're good? Yeah. Pauline.
Thanks. I've got a question on page 24 about the leakage from our reticulation network, please. And I'm just wondering if we have the ability to determine the geographical areas of where the most leakages occur, and do we know the percentage of the leakages which are Banks Peninsula?
Yes, we do. We have an estimate for that. But one of the things that we're doing around the leakage rate, you'll recall that part of the water reform stimulus funding,
Yes.
we've got some additional money to look at leaks and to do some follow-up repairs. So yes, we do have that information if you'd like it on what the leakage rates are in the Banks Peninsula
Well, what I'm
segments and
really
across
trying
the
to
city.
get at is it's 23% citywide, including Banks Peninsula. Is there a higher leakage percentage in Banks Peninsula, which is increasing a percentage in the city?
No.
So
It's mixed, and some parts of Banks Peninsula are actually very good.
right. Okay,
So,
that's
yeah.
interesting. All right.
So
Thank you.
it's the older parts of the city, and it's most of this water is major leaks from mains, not minor leaks on the footpath, which all the complaints come in about.
Right.
But so those do contribute, but these are major leaks from mains.
Right. Because is this going to impact on our water safety plan being approved?
Potentially. However, it's not flagged as a high risk in our current water safety plan.
No.
Because obviously, as long as you have positive pressure in the main, the water is going out, and there's no prospect of water coming in through those cracks in the mains.
Is it possible to have water safety plans approved in zones?
Yes, it is, and that is one of the things that we are looking at.
Right.
But that sits alongside the rezoning project. So at the moment we have 8 water supply zones across the city, and they range from very small with just a couple of thousand connections to very large. And what the water rezoning project proposes is changing those to more manageable size zones, so more even size zones, and doing better pressure management within those zones. And yes, we have looked at whether or not we then do a water safety plan for that zone. However, we will almost certainly, we will have connections from one zone to another, because that's part of the resilience of the overall supply to the city. So it's still an open question whether it's appropriate to go to a water safety plan for each zone, or to maintain one for the whole city. One of the things that we've been talking to the drinking water assessors and the Ministry of Health about is whether or not you can have a sort of overall water safety plan which has all of your policy settings, for example, and your overall management approach, and then separate water safety plans by zone, and that would include separate ones across Banks Peninsula, for example.
Right.
And that is a model that they are interested in. So,
that's good.
It is possible.
Because that could enable us potentially to take chlorine out by zones.
It would, yes.
So I think
Right.
Pauline's question about leakage gives rise to a further question. Given that the larger amount of leakage is from the mains, should that then be an area for priority given that we would likely get a better return on any maintenance investment if that's where the major leakage is coming from?
I think it's a question of both. So the leakage from the mains is largely addressed by renewals rather than by repairs, because it's generally a large section of a main that's beyond its useful life. So it's those older mains across the city. It's difficult to address leakage from damaged mains just by a repair program. It's about a renewals program.
All right, thank you. Aaron.
Yeah, so if you were going to design new zones for the water, to, like you say, more manageable, would you have them as isolation zones? So not all the time, they all run independently, so you base them on how much well heads you got, and then you would have them all isolated and only interconnect them when you have to, so that way they would be able to be proven to be more demonstrably safe.
That's exactly how we operate it now, and yes, that is the plan for the future.
Cool.
Yes.
Thank you. So we've got a recommendation in front of us to receive the information in this report, which I'm happy to move. Yanni, you'll second.
Can we just get a note that we've asked for the information back on the water supply? I've reread the staff memo that's sent, and we were told that a short-term injection of resources is an obvious solution. Staff are working with CityCare to implement a plan to reduce the backlog. Can we just note that we've asked for a copy of that plan, or?
I mean, I think we can be confident that we're going to get it without a need for a formal note. We can be confident of that, can't we?
You can.
Thank you.
And we'll get a breakdown of the service response times
as you requested.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Moved by me, seconded by Yanni. Is there any debate? All those in favour say aye. Against, that's carried. So now moving to, and Peter, you're already at the table, which is great, the LTP 2021 update. Thank you.
Okay, this is again quite similar to last month. The process is based on the councillor's letter of expectation. It's probably fair to say we have used up a lot of the lead time that we built in the early part of the year. That's evaporated now. While there are some yellow flags in there, we are generally okay for building components. OPEX savings and budgets are behind, but not irretrievably so. Capital prioritisation behind, but not irretrievably so. But the timing issue, and I realise you've heard this before and I apologise for it, it isn't that hard to build the components, but aligning them takes time. So FS and the financial and infrastructure strategies actually talking to each other properly will take some time. The IS talking to asset plans, the savings decisions talking to levels of service changes. Those things take time, and we're probably only just on time, and that's about all. So the focus that the agendas have shown this month is worth it, because it will pay dividends by not having a real backlog in November. So I realise, for example, this week you had capital yesterday, you've got engagement today, you've got EAG tomorrow. That's the pace that we kind of need to get there on this. So that's the big view. Just moving quickly through the work streams, the overall approach, co-development. Look, there's been a great deal more interaction between staff, management and councillors on this than there was last time. Strategic direction and the priorities are fine. The central government priorities, COVID-19 recovery, climate change, deliverability of capital and asset renewals, they're different things, but in general we'll probably need to lift our game a little bit there. We've got the version 1.0, but we couldn't honestly look at those four and say we can tick the boxes just yet, but there is also time to go. Infrastructure strategy has been well received. Financial strategy, the overall parameters are much better understood than they were, say, 6 weeks ago. Gavin Thomas in strategy is assisting with the writing of that strategy. Operational savings and budgets. Look, our process is slow, but perhaps it's appropriate that it is because of the risks involved and the implications of that. It is causing circlebacks. So you see activities, it's highlighted that they don't have budgets in them. they need to circle back, which is a use of your time. If we have too many of those, it'll become ponderous. Activity plans, okay, except for the issue I've just raised. Asset plans, there are some issues on a minor key there, particularly around size and focus, I guess, and orientation. Capital prioritisation, well, you spent virtually all of yesterday talking about that. I don't know if it's worth dwelling on, except to say that we need to move at pace on that. And I was greatly encouraged by councillors' willingness to find days to do that, spearheaded by the Mayor. That will really help the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor. And you'll be hearing about engagement at lunchtime today, the program that they're recommending. And in terms of process review, I met with Audit New Zealand yesterday. They're kicking off their process. Staff have completed the self-assessment health check, which will be coming to you as well in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So that's a quick overview of where we're at. We're generally there, but if we can go hard in October, it will make November and early December much more agile.
All right, Peter, thanks very much indeed for that introduction, and thanks for the report. And I think the matters that you've highlighted show the value and the importance of us bringing this report to the committee on a monthly basis so that we can maintain the required degree of oversight of this absolutely key piece of work. I'm certainly very keen to focus on the work programme between now and the end of the calendar year, the time that we've got in diaries, the opportunity to make the best use of that time we can and to ensure we've got sufficient time to do the work as planned and to recover those items which have either fallen slightly behind or are borderline. I'm confident that we can do that. And as you quite rightly say, as long as we continue to work at pace in October and probably into November, we can have everything on target by the time that anybody thinks about going on Christmas holidays. So it certainly is recoverable, but the value in the report that we've got in front of us really is the ability to highlight exactly the issues that we're talking about at the moment.
And I think the important thing is we are not taking an optimistic view. We continue to be realistic. Hence, we know we've done a lot of work on OPEX, but we're keeping it at red until we can get to the point where we know we've got the quantum. And once that gets there, then that changes. We won't change that light until we're at that point.
Yep, and we've got a pathway to get there. We just need to run through those sessions and provide that guidance. Sam.
Thanks very much, Peter. So just in terms of the operational savings and activity budgets, which are flagged red, obviously we had the deadline of Monday for those. Has that been delivered? Like, when will we see those?
So I think it's important.
I think it's closer to die.
Because we built the 15 million.
So the aim was to have group and unit budgets and then activity budgets to follow,
Yes.
with some of the savings that are more intricate to follow after.
So the group budgets have been circulated. They went out on Monday. The activity budgets, I saw the first cut this morning. I just need to check that the GMs are happy with them, and the rest of the savings we're working through. We need to agree a date to bring them back, but they are to go to ELT on Monday.
Okay. So in terms of the, I don't know, we've talked about it in briefings, and it may be a question for Dawn, just in terms of those aspects, that the saving areas you were going to go away and look at, will those savings be incorporated into that as well? Or?
Yes, as far as we have got, they will be. When I see the figures myself, because I haven't seen them yet,
Okay.
Sam. Yeah. No doubt Di will brief me either today or tomorrow.
The version that went out on Monday had the savings that were identified on the 22nd.
Yeah, and we're going to keep at it. That's all we can do.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we should be able to see that sooner rather than later.
You'll see it keep building.
Yeah.
And then we go back into our conversations in workshops to test with you.
Yeah.
And see what that looks
Well, I guess
like.
yeah, that's probably where I'm just trying to understand the process. So, like, we've obviously had a first cut as a council of some savings, but we haven't. I mean, there's still a very large amount that we need to make decisions on.
Correct.
So I'm just wondering how that timeline works in terms of us making more decisions on operational savings.
Obviously
you making
not decisions, guidance.
Sorry, guidance. Yeah.
So it's important that we recognise that.
Yes.
And hence why when we discussed yesterday about making sure we get our extra dates in and availability of members and utilising that time, including the community week on Tuesdays, and we're going to utilise that time as well. So I think that will be around OPEX, capital and levels of service.
Okay.
And I expect us to be doing that in October into early November.
All right.
So we can keep building. I'm, I won't say optimistic, I'm cautiously clear that we can get there.
Okay.
But that requires all of us, not just the officers, in terms of that guidance.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Jimmy and then Aaron. Jimmy.
Chair, yeah. A couple of days ago, community board on behalf of community have made a presentation for our long-term plan. I just want to know throughout the long-term plan, where about we can see whether we put on the as a recommendation or just ignore the state of where we can see to emerge this information.
There's another similar one in November, which is the circle back to say, here's staff have investigated, staff have looked at the recommendations, here's what's supported and here's what we propose to not be supported. That's in November. So it's not a case of, it's not a case of wait until the draft in February. There'll be another community board discussion in November.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron.
Yeah, Peter, is it not really difficult to be working on those savings plans and finding them prior to us doing a big review of the levels of service? Or a major review of levels of service?
No, some of them are possible because they're not actually connected to levels of service. They're to do with how we build ourselves and so forth. So, but there are savings that are connected to levels of service, and that's why I mentioned earlier that the alignment thing will take time. If you do opt to lower a level of service, we'll need to go back and look at, if you do opt to lower a budget, we'll also need to check that the level of service is still remotely realistic. If you dial a budget down by 20%, the level of service probably needs to go down as well.
Yeah, so is that not the wrong way round? Shouldn't you try and set your levels of service or review them and then reset them if needed and then do your budget?
Yes, I'll note that a lot of the bigger asset-based activities have been reviewed by council already without those decisions coming through.
So does that not mean we potentially have to do it all twice?
Well, when the budgets are in, those activities are circling back, so you'll get a second bite of the cherry there, and maybe that's the place to have that discussion.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right. So again, we've got a recommendation just to note this update. Jimmy, you'd like to move. Pauline will second. Any debate? All those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now moving on to the closeout report for the Capital Delivery Community Hallswell Skate Park. And Darren, welcome to the table. Any remarks that you'd like to make on this report?
Kia ora tātou. Just to introduce the project manager, Steve Gray. He's one of the very experienced project managers on my team. Skate park in Hallswell Domain opened around 18 months ago, and this captures the journey of that project. So we'll take it as read and take any questions.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions on this report? Leanne.
I have a couple of questions. So one was in relation to the sorry, I've got the wrong document open in front of me. Apologies. The now I've opened the wrong one. Ask someone else first.
Okay, Yanni, we'll come to you first, and then I'll come right back to you. Yanni.
The lessons learnt was quite interesting. There's a quote on page 81. Contractors based outside Christchurch can add real value in reducing project overall cost, which kind of raised my eyebrows because, you know, obviously it raises two questions for me. One is, are we getting ripped off locally? And if so, how do we mitigate that? But also, how we are procuring, have we got the right mechanisms in place to ensure we're getting value? So I don't know if you could just maybe elaborate a little bit on that, because I was quite impressed with the cost of this project versus what you delivered compared to other ones that I've seen.
Steve can take some of the account for that. He's done a few of these skate parks in the past. To answer the procurement question, we put these on GETS, which is nationwide. Skate parks are a reasonably, what would you call it?
quite specialised.
Yeah, and in doing so, there are only, I suppose, there's a handful or maybe a few more, Steve, that could do that. So in this case, we found somebody that offered the overall best value for money, both in terms of price and non-price attributes that came to the party here, and it just so happened that we got tremendous value from this contractor.
Yeah, so the contractor that Angus McMillan, so he's actually based up in Hastings, and he gave us a very good price in terms of the construction. With our procurement method, it was a weighted attributes contract, but it was a selected contractor because, again, as Darren mentioned, it's we want people that specialise in this type of concreting work. Angus has been in this game for a long time, and he knows exactly what he's doing with developing a skate park. We do have other local contractors. In this case here, they didn't put in the best price to win this particular contract, but we did get a very good value on this one. We had two skate parks that we built at a similar time, this one and Night Stream. A local contractor won the contract for Night Stream. Again, they won it through that tendering process through weighted attributes. So it does come down to how much a contractor is, I suppose, prepared to buy a contract if that's what they need to do to keep themselves busy, or whether they're making profit out of it. We've had a car park recently actually where we've had 15 tenders came in and a huge range of submissions, and that was from places up in Tasman through to Ashburton, as well as all the local contractors. So it really depends on just where the contracting field is at that time.
So even with the cost of getting equipment down here, and it still works out cheaper?
Yeah, it's still cheaper for them to come down and set themselves up for several months. He brought down, I think, 4 staff from memory to build this and set them up down here for the 2 months.
Okay. And is there a level of awareness within the local market that they're not been as competitive as perhaps we would expect?
Yeah, we as part of being a good provider of work to the community, we take time to ensure that we debrief each of those individuals. So I appreciate the time and the cost that it takes contractors, private individuals, small or large, to prepare tender documentation. So part of our deal is that we'll take time to debrief them for the unsuccessful ones. So they're given that, and they'll come in, they'll meet with Steve or any other member of my team for half an hour. We'll look at their non-price performance, and also we'll give them an indication of where they sit in the overall pricing thing as well. So that's part of our partnership and collaboration with that contracting community.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, just the other question I had was, I noted that you, although the project came in on budget, which was great, it added some additional equipment through, I guess, program budgets. And I guess this kind of goes back to the conversation we've been having. Like I know at our board, when we've tried to get things like water fountains put in, we're told there's no money and we can't. So same with shelter, we've funded that through our discretionary. So I'm just kind of wondering what the process is for these projects to add additional expenditure from program budgets, and what the decision making is through council or community board or staff, and how we take a consistent approach across the various projects that we inevitably get.
Well, in terms of this project, we had through the early consultation process, it had been raised around providing shelter, and the community was quite keen on seeing some adult fitness equipment going in. So through that consultation process, we went back and had conversations with the Parks Unit, with the project sponsor. We looked at what they had in terms of their project budgets available at that time, and they said, look, we've actually got this funding around. I think we had money out of sports park structures new, as well as play and recreational new budget, which still had the capacity to add these as items as part of this project. If we didn't, then we would have either amended the plan before it went back to the board as a final, and we would have made that clear through the consultation that we didn't have the funding for those items. In this case, we were able to.
Understand how we're having a consistent approach across the organisation. So is it just based on who asks who when?
Well, I think it just happened to be this particular year they had the money available to be able to support these extra items. It may not happen this year, but it might be the way it works in next year's budget.
I probably can't talk to the organisational approach, but in this case it was, as Steve alluded to, it was the case of we started with the scope of a skate park, and viewing the bigger picture and the community needs, we determined there were some other community aspirations. We talked to my colleagues in both Parks and Sport and Rec, who said that they had money tagged and available to bring into this project. So I won't talk to the bigger organisational approach as to how those programs and projects are developed. But in this case, this is what we ended up with.
Yeah, thanks for what you've done. It's report, and it looks like a really successful project. So
been very well received.
Yep, and under budget. You know, certainly on budget was mentioned earlier, but under budget, which is always good to see as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Leanne.
But a year late. So, and that's the 11 months late that concerned me, because a significant chunk of that was the resource consenting, and that's on the organisation. So what went wrong with the resource consenting?
Yeah.
I don't think anything went wrong.
No, I think it was just the questions, as stated in here. We had a total of 8 Lagoimas that we received through the process.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Lagoimas separately,
yep.
But are they relevant to the resource
through
consenting?
Through the Lagoima process, which also then created some of those delays around the consenting. For instance, one of the Lagoimas was around the acoustic report that we had done for the skate facility. That was challenged as part of the consent process, and the people that challenged it had actually gone to a London-based consultant. So we then had to get our report peer-reviewed against that. So it's just all those ongoing time in terms of creates delays in terms of that, and that flow-on effect then delayed us from actually going to tender. I think the consent itself was
there's a symbiotic relationship between Lagoima. It was really around the noise. No one wanted a skate park. There's a perception that skate parks are noisy.
Yeah, which is why I really loved you taking a comment from the community, which was I was opposed to this.
Yes.
And now I'm a guardian.
Yes.
Because I love what it's doing for the kids.
So Lagoima's in relation to resource consent, the two of those moving together, that was primarily the significant delay, was making sure that we'd addressed all of the Lagoima issues that then allowed us to put forward a robust resource consent application. So we took our time through that process to ensure that what we got ticked the Lagoima boxes and met that process, but also made sure that we had a really robust resource consent application that could get approved and did in the end.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because my question around Lagoima was, have we learnt the lesson about, whether as much information can be put in the public arena so that people don't need to Lagoima it, but you're now saying that the purpose of the Lagoima requests in large, or by and large, were in relation to the resource consent application.
It was a bit of everything.
Right.
So we had 3 Lagoima requests when we first started the project looking at site location, because the project actually started off where we didn't have a site for building this. We started
you had
off
about 34 sites, I think.
Yeah, that's right. 34 potential sites we could have looked at, and through a matrix system that we had, which was looking at things like land parcel size, setbacks from residential properties. We use a 40-metre setback when it comes to dealing with acoustic noise with skate parks. So looking at other facilities that are close by, such as toilets, shops, bus routes. It's taken all of those things into account, so that whittled it down to sort of 4 possible sites, and that's what we went out and consulted on. So we received 3 Lagoimas based on those sites, and people wanted more information relating to that matrix, to the concept that we're looking at, how it would fit into that site.
Was there anything that we can learn from that in respect to what can we make publicly available at the time to reduce the need for people to actually filter through the Lagoima process?
Yeah, it was interesting because actually I was this morning talking to the park planner actually that was involved with the project, and we'd actually already taken a lot of lessons learned out of the Sumner skate park, the Levi skate park, because that was stopped in, I think it was in 2015, and we took a lot of lessons from that in terms of that early engagement. So in this case here, even before we went out and consulted, we had already gone, and our engagement advisors had been even through door knockings on some of those properties close to where we were proposing to consult on. So we were actually engaging very early on this. We were aware that skate parks can be contentious. We felt that we actually had made a really good effort to get that out to the public at an early stage.
No, I'm not talking about going out to the public at an early stage. I'm talking about what they asked for. You know, do we take a lesson learned from what they asked for that was then subsequently released under the Lagoima that we could have basically put on site, put on a website straight away and just said all of the information's here?
Some of the information we didn't have at the time, so there was things that they were asking.
But it's not covered by Lagoima if it doesn't exist at the time.
No, but they were still asking the question, and because unfortunately the request comes in and they actually put there, we're asking this information under the Official Information Act, we've got to go through that process in terms of the timing to respond to it. Even if we don't have the information, it still takes time to go through that.
Yes, I know. I understand that. So how much were most of the requests things that didn't exist?
Oh, look, I've got a list here of all the items they'd asked for. You know, people were asking for a copy of the overlay plan presented at the workshop that we held, the SIPTED report. You know what SIPTED is? Yeah. The brief given to the skate park designer, the landscape concept, the acoustic reporting, resource consent application. So there's a whole range of things that were...
A lot of those things are publicly, able to be made available publicly.
Yeah.
So my question is were they on a public website that people could access?
We put as much information on as we felt was needed at the time, and based on this, yes, we could look at putting additional information on.
What I'm interested in is lessons learned from these. And that's all.
Yeah.
But you just answered my question. Thank you.
So yes, we could, but it's one of those things you just don't know what you're going to get asked either. So
maybe it's not a question of putting up what you think you might get asked. Maybe put as much as should be available on the basis of transparency. Put it on a website so that it's not under the Lagoima website, but under the under the Lagoima page, but under the project page, and then people can look to their heart's content.
There are other projects where that's happened very successfully. The Akaro wastewater project, for example, would be one where we've done exactly what Leanne is suggesting.
Right. Okay.
All right. Sarah.
Yeah, so just quickly following on from that, so the lessons learned from that and the discussion that you've just had will then flow into the next Sumner Skate Park.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent.
Great. Thank you. Are there any further questions? Anne?
Yeah, thank you. At the moment, we are in the process of putting some accessible playground equipment into Hallsville Domain and getting that done, which is fantastic. Back to the question about, in terms of the process of planning something like this, when would the community board or residents put into that process a request for something like accessible playground equipment? It kind of goes back to the question that was asked previously, but it would be great to be able to have an accessible playground equipment as part of something like this as a given, rather than actually have to do it after the event. When would be a good place for that to happen?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can give you the right answer on that, to be quite honest. I think it's one of those things that this accessible playground's obviously come through as an additional request since this project's closed out. It's one of those ones, I know, working with the park planners, we've often said to the community, if there's something they want, use the LTP process for requesting equipment or additional upgrades, so that way it goes through that proper channel. It can be looked at in terms of funding. It can be planned out properly. We do get a lot of these requests, I suppose, that do come directly to the board, and then it's how do we make that fit within a current budget, and sometimes those budgets just aren't available at the time, and that's where the LTP process is useful for the community to, I suppose, to take that process and put in submissions around it. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's answered it for you, but...
All right, thank you. Are there any further questions? You're happy to move this, Jimmy? Do I have a seconder? Melanie? Is there any debate?
Because this one is critical, I think it's a very good model, particularly if we review scope, then meet, community needs, and also through the open, transparent the consultation, and also the budget, $391,000. Eventually, 102 surplus. That's amazing. Across the 3 years, actually, it's very, very impressive, and also warmly welcomed by the young people, by the community, etc. Even during consultation time period, my understanding still have but some of the surrounding area residents have kind of concern, noise issue, etc. But eventually, through the conversation and mitigate those effects, then have very good outcome. That's pretty good. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anne.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the work that Steve, you did in terms of getting this was a very long and drawn out and complex project, and you worked with community, and the team did an awful lot of work to bring along some at times very difficult people who were very opposed, as we've heard through the Lagoimas and things, and now we have a community that's actually really supportive and happy. So I also really wanted to acknowledge the fact that you really took into account the young people's voice in this, and they actually really drove a lot of what happened here. So it's been a very good project and much appreciated, and thank you for 2 skate parks out there. It's fantastic. Thank you.
All right, thank you. No further debate, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against, as carried. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed. So now moving on to item 11, which is the V-Base Limited equity injection for the town hall costs. So Len, welcome to the table. Just noting Tim's conflict here. Any remarks on this report, please?
This is a technical paper putting in the mechanism in place in which to enact the decisions previously made by council of topping up those costs for the town hall to V-Base. That's purely and simply what this is.
Yep, and I think that's entirely the point. This report is about the mechanism to deal with the issue that was outstanding from previous decision making, a matter that was the result of previous decision making.
This ensures that V-Base can pay back council to $12 million.
Absolutely. Yep. Sam.
I just wondered if someone could clarify why the mechanism wasn't agreed when the additional funding was approved.
The committee requested the council, the staff, to come back with a list of the projects that would generate savings. So there was a reason for not doing it at that point in time, because they had to come back with those savings, and therefore only after those savings were we going to do this, put this in place.
But we didn't agree at the time that it would be an equity conversion.
Correct. Yeah.
We didn't. Okay. So why didn't we? No, I'm not talking about the value, but the mechanism for doing it.
We'd already topped up $45 million worth of project costs, and this came in later on. And we had to find the savings to be able to do it. That's basically the deal. The way we inject the money coming in is purely by looking for within our capital program rather than new money. The council really no new money going into it, so it had to come from our existing capital base.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
It doesn't really answer Sam's question. Sam's question is, why didn't we consider a mechanism at the time? And I don't recall the answer to that, but it was better to wait for this final report. One, the amount was going to be different. We didn't actually know whether we would require the 15 million, and we didn't know where the savings would be found. So it's just a tidy up mechanism. That's all it is.
And certainly from memory, that was well acknowledged at the time. It was always known that a report such as this would come in front of us in due course, which would be the way of addressing the savings required, or would be a mechanism to address the issue. So this really is, as has been said, the tidy up of an outstanding matter, a mechanism for resolving an outstanding matter which was acknowledged at the time, and it was always known that there would be some solution for the matter. This is what's in front of us today.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is for those of us that weren't here at the time, there hasn't been a binding approach to how we do this. So I'm just trying to understand why we didn't look at potentially, instead of propping it up again or putting them in an equity, looking at finding operational savings and just writing it off. So I'm just trying to understand why we didn't consider that approach at all.
Maybe staff can comment. It's quite possible that approach was considered.
Yeah, the key thing is that it was straight away after the $45 million injection, they decided that the costs were going to go up. They were still value engineering the town hall to ensure that we got the best possible price for what we did. So there could have been an inclusion in that paper that, yes, we would have done the equity injection, but we would never known how much. This tells us we need 12 million, not 1, 2, 3 or 4, 5.
And so just one other question, if that's okay. I'm just trying to understand the defect period. So is this issues with the contractor, or is this scope work that we've basically mucked up at the time?
No, there are various contractors provided us with contracts. The CSO is the last big piece of work, and the CSO defects period goes to September 21.
Okay, so would some of this cost not fall back on those who have done the work if we're in a defects period?
Oh, yes, they will, but there's the amount of money that's coming back to us to complete that work, and a lot of this is going to be project management of those defect period, and so the new waste store is a piece of work which was included late in the piece, and therefore once that's complete, that will have a defect period. So that's why there's a project management.
Yeah,
there's a project management element of this tail, which is what we have to do, and that's the smallest piece of the work of this money.
So these extra costs are additional work; they're not issues with the building.
Correct, they're not issues with the building. There's a piece of it's just the waste store is a new piece of work, and things, and the Ferrier fountain is still part of that work that's going to be fixed.
So how did we get the scope? And I don't know how do we get the scope? So, and it's probably not a question for you. At the time, this just seems extraordinary.
Yeah, Diane, you might want to make some comment on this. I mean, it may well be that there's a need to refer some of these questions back to the previous reporting in the previous term of council.
Yeah.
Because, the questions you're asking, Sam, really relate to how we arrived at the position that we're in, rather than the mechanism for solving the issue that we've ended up with. But certainly there was a lot of documentation at the time, many previous reports. Diane, do you have any comment on this?
I can't talk to the scope, but I agree we should ask for a report back on the scope. But to answer your other question about why we didn't consider savings, it's because this is part of the capital cost of the town hall, and therefore should be funded through equity. It is not an operational cost as other amounts we've considered with VBase. So looking for operational savings would not have been the appropriate treatment to handle the cost.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand though why we would, if we blow a scope out or change scope, I accept there's a capital portion to it, but why didn't we make, and that comes back to that mechanism at the start when we approved the additional money. Why didn't we consider cutting our cloth somewhere else? It just seems strange to me.
I'm sorry, we'd have to get the engineers here who considered it at the time, and while one of them was here earlier, he's left. So
yeah, okay.
I think we'll bring it. There will need to be a final closeout report, and I think we can consider it as part of that.
Okay.
I think that's probably where a lot of your questions will be able to be answered, would be in a closeout report for this project.
Cool.
And I think it would be entirely appropriate that we bring that as soon as we're able to.
At the December 18 meeting of council, basically this became such an important issue that the team were requested to report monthly back on the town hall, covering these matters, exactly what we're talking about today. What we're doing now is just fixing up that $12 million.
So what will be crucial, because this is one of those things in the closeout report, I am sure there will be a very large lessons learnt section in this, and we need to be really clear about what they are and ensuring that they're embedded in the organisation going forward. I'm sure a lot of them will have probably already been put in.
Yeah, we'll all look forward to reading that
clarity.
report.
Yes, I'm sure.
All right, thank you, James.
Thanks. Yeah, unfortunately for Sam, not a lot of those staff are still around that you could ask. But as far as this paper goes, it proposes a 12 mil equity injection. There's 9.8 of debt owing by VBase. So that leaves about 2.2 mil for the waste storage and remedial work on the fountain. My question is, what incentive is there for the remaining 2.2 million to not be exhausted? And if that money isn't fully spent, does that get returned to council, or does that sit on VBase's balance sheet?
This proposal is up to 12 million. So we'll be receiving 9.8 on the table today, and we're going to have project costs for the completion of the waste collection area and the project management costs during the defect period. That has been given to me as concrete numbers. If we only need 11, we'll only do 11. If we need 10.8, we'll do 10.8.
So what, you essentially purchase the shares or inject the equity upon receiving the receipts?
Correct. Yeah.
So it gives basically a cheque or a limit up to $12 million worth of equity injection dependent on what's...
We believe we won't need the 12.
Okay, so then that brings me back to the first question, and what incentive is there then for savings, I guess, to be found from throughout that process if there's up to 12 million there?
I don't think that's a question for you.
Yeah, I can't answer that from the capital team's point of view, but they'll be working on that, and all I'll know is what will come in front of me.
So following on from Sam's though, there's probably more incentive there if you eat the debt or you write it off, essentially, then you've got, and you find those, and I appreciate the capitals, but if you find, for example, the savings via capital channels, you've got an incentive there because everything that you're writing off has got an equal and opposite effect somewhere else on the balance sheet. So keeping it, following it through a debt write-off process, it would seem to me tight is a good word. It essentially keeps the incentive to minimise cost blowouts or exhausting funds, because otherwise you've essentially just got not a blank cheque, but a cheque there up to a certain quantum.
Yeah, I mean that's why we went back to the project managers and the capital team to say, what are the projects you still have to complete, and how much is that tail going to cost us? And so therefore, when that came through, we challenged the team on that. We asked them twice to make sure that that's what's going to be the case. There should be no additional overruns. There should be no additional projects. Anything else that comes in will just be thing. And any of that surplus money will stay within the capital program. So that's how that will work. It's not as if those we've taken 12 out of the program and not. It actually will, if it reverts back September 21, that's where it will happen. It'll just come back into that capital pool at that point in time.
Okay, thanks, Len.
All right, thank you. Yanni.
How much external fundraising did we get in the end? Do we know? Was the Christchurch Foundation or?
Let's go with the capital program on that one. To the best of my knowledge, very little.
Right.
Again, this is the opportunity for questions on this mechanism. I
just thought if we were getting if we had some money coming in from that external fundraising, then I thought, well, we might not need, and I appreciate you've said it's up to 12 million, but we've got a pretty detailed summary of where other money is coming from, but we just have complete silence on that external fundraising. So I thought it was pretty relevant. The other question I had was, did we consider CCHL actually putting the equity in rather than council? And if so, why would they not do it? Or if not, why not?
CCHL. We're the sole shareholder. Council's the sole shareholder in V-Base.
It's not CCHL company.
CCHL does not own any shares in V-Base.
Yeah. But previously it used to, didn't it?
No. Council has always owned V-Base directly.
Right, it reported to CCHL.
No.
CCHL monitors it and runs the
there was a relationship.
Process.
So I just wondered
whether,
and I have raised this previously with the whole V-Base restructure and everything that's happening around whether you could put it into the group of companies to offset the losses that it's making. So, I don't know when we get that information back, but
again, that's a different matter than, there will be some further conversation about V-Base and structure and so on in due course, and that certainly would be the right time to be talking about any tax advantages, organisational advantages,
but the key
that
thing
sort of
for
thing.
This is V-Base is a member of the council's tax group, not accounting and consolidated. It's part of the consolidated group, but as part of the tax matters are concerned, V-Base, CCHL are all part of the tax group, and all makes no difference.
All right, thank you. Any further questions on this, Aaron?
It's only a small one. It's under number 6, and it says strategic alignment. This report does not support the council's long-term plan. Why is that the wording?
What's the question? Why doesn't it support the long-term plan?
Yeah. It says it does not support.
This is not in the long-term plan. The V-Base injection is not in the capital program is in the. This is the template we operate under, and so therefore, effectively, it's
right. It just the wording just seems odd. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. It's actually how you describe it. So 6.1 should have explained why it doesn't meet the council's long-term plan objectives, because it's not part of the capital programme.
It's not
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Rather than just, it's not a template issue, it's the words that are put in.
Yeah, whereas it does, it is consistent with the council's plans and policies, but this does not support the council's long-term plan.
Yeah.
So that's what it should have said.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Okay. Can I have a mover for these recommendations? All right, well, I'll move the recommendations. Can I have a seconder? Leanne will second. Is there any debate? I'll put the motion. Oh, James.
Yeah, very quickly. Look, I won't support it. It won't surprise anyone that there's a slight element which is the matter of principle, and I'm torn because this problem needs a solution, and I do appreciate that. But this is just the gift that keeps on giving. It was originally a $127 million budget, which then had a $45 million equity injection. Now this is another equity injection of up to $12 million. It is what it is, and look, let's be honest, it's a fabulous facility. It's just that the process wasn't a good one. And that being said, though, my preference is a tighter approach when the fact of the matter is everything has a cost associated with it. And yes, you can keep buying shares or issuing shares and injecting equity into it. But there still is a cost to that. And yes, you can borrow it, but the ratepayer is still picking up the tab. So my view is keep it tighter. There is a cost associated with it, and my preference would be to simply write off the $9.8 million, which is the amount owing today, and then pay for it via capital savings. I think that keeps it tight. It means the accountability sits in this unit, and you're not continuing to issue shares. So I just think it's a tighter approach.
Thank you, Sam.
I mean, I tend to agree with Jamie and just signal that I'd foreshadow if this was to fail, a motion to the effect that we can work on the wording around writing off the receivable. I'll do that for, I guess, two reasons. Largely, I think, this has continued to blow out, but I think secondly, I wasn't here at the time that we approved the additional budget, and from my point of view, I think there needs to be a mechanism in place. There should have been a mechanism in place agreed at the time on how we would do this. The fact that there's not, and the fact that we could go up to 12 million, I think we need to be far more disciplined as an organisation. So I'd much rather see it written off, acknowledging there is an impact on that and that we find operational savings. I think we need to get to a point where we just stop borrowing for the sake of it, and we need to drive far more discipline through the place. So I won't support it like this, but if this was to fail, we'll just signal that I'm happy to put up a motion to the effect of writing off the receivable.
Yep, thank you. Leanne.
I think there would be a high risk in going down an alternative track to this one. Council staff have looked at all of the options. One, do nothing, continue to record a receivable for the cost to be reimbursed by VBase, less than desirable from a financial reporting standpoint, and a provision for doubtful debts would need to be applied to the outstanding balance as it is unlikely to be paid. Write off the receivable, which is the proposal. For an alternative resolution, Council may choose to recognise that VBase cannot meet the reimbursement commitment and write off the receivable balance of $9.8 million along with any future expenditure on Town Hall repair and restoration project. This would have a significant impact on rates. So without any discussion around that, I think that would be irresponsible. Partial equity injection and partial write-off, also substantial impact on rates, but would be less than a full write-off. Lend VBase the money, and they already have loans in relation to a number of other matters. I think that the option that has been put in front of us, although the situation is not an ideal situation because of how we got there, this is an ideal proposal for the Council to consider, and indeed for resolving this particular part of the matter. And can I just say that although this particular project suffered from extremely poor project governance and management structures, and partway through the process a council team was put in to take the place of what was there before. So it is agreed that how we got into this situation is something that we never ever want to see happen in this council again, but that the council did pick it up and step in such a way as to minimise the future damage that would have been occurred if that project management structure had been allowed to continue. So it wasn't, there weren't adequate controls, it was very poor controls, poor project governance, poor management structures. That is specifically called out in this paper, and this project is the reason that we now have the closeout reports. So we are going to get a closeout report on this, and that will enable us to understand in real detail about all of the whys and wherefores, and we will be able to make sure that this never ever happens again. That being said, Town Hall is extraordinary. I went to the leaders' debate last night. It is the best venue. It was a live venue because we're at level 1, and it was the best debate that I have ever seen. I thought both performed extraordinarily well, and I know that the venue and the people that were in it actually made it happen the way that it did. So, and I think democracy is well served by that. So the Town Hall's a really good project.
Thank you. I was going to comment, but I don't actually see the need to do so now. So, yeah, thank you very much indeed. We will... No further debate? Yanni, thank you.
I just wanted to just reference the staff advice, is that the option that the staff have recommended has the least impact on rates. The options that people have foreshadowed will have a significant impact on rates. So I just wanted to make that point because I just think we need to be really clear. I mean, none of us wanted to be in this position, but we are in this position. Ironically, V-Base is actually suffering from having to still pay off the loan from the last redevelopment of a stadium for a Rugby World Cup. And we had the earthquake, which has put us in a really, obviously, an extraordinary situation. So let's not forget, one of the drivers behind why V-Base is unable to incur the costs is because they're still paying off the loan for the last time we redeveloped Lancaster Park for the Rugby World Cup. So, you know, I think there'll be a lot of lessons that we can learn from this, and particularly with the new stadium that we're building, let's make sure that we do learn those lessons. But today's really about trying to find the most cost-effective way to address the shortfall, and I think staff option is the one that does that rather than what's been signalled.
You've spoken once already. So
well, if you want to do that, then I'll move an amendment. So I can either way, or you could just.
You can't move an amendment.
Well, can I correct? I didn't want to do a point of order because what the foreshadowed motion is actually explain something that Yanni said, which was.
Well, do you want to put forward a foreshadowed motion with wording?
He can't. He's spoken.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, do you want to know what people are voting for or against?
We were just
you're
trying to
making other
clarify.
decisions. Town Hall take two.
We were just trying to clarify for Yanni
Do you
that
want to
a dollar is
clarify?
a dollar regardless.
This is why you end up in the situation that you do.
Yeah.
Because you don't listen.
We tend to just borrow for the sake of borrowing. A dollar is still a dollar.
If you were... Okay.
The two obviously.
I suspect that this is going to carry...
I have 10 seconds to say
I
where
suspect that this is going to carry when I put it.
Phil is indicating. Phil.
So in terms of the foreshadowed motion...
In terms of the foreshadowed motion, it wouldn't have the impact on rates because what's being proposed is a foreshadowed motion.
No, the foreshadowed motion...
Point of order, Mr Chairman.
Is it...
There is a foreshadowed motion. The person that's seeking to put another foreshadowed motion is actually... has already spoken in the debate,
yes.
And you don't get a second bite of the cherry.
All right.
So you don't want to know how...
The
Who cares? It's just ratepayer money.
The foreshadowed motion was... It's clear what it is. We understand what it is. People, when they vote, know that foreshadowed motion is there and it's capable of being debated if and when we get to it. The time for that debate is not now. Does anybody else wish to speak to the motion that's on the table? Phil.
We're not borrowing the $12 million. We are borrowing the $12 million, so that's why the rates will go up.
Is that a question?
if I was asking that as
is
a
this
debate
debate or is this a question? We're in debate.
Yeah, that would be my point if I was debating. But I'm just, yeah, all right, no, oh, yeah.
Sarah?
Confused.
I didn't actually have my hand up, but I... yeah. So, no, I mean, there's one thing to wanting to keep things tidy, but when it comes to the advice on rates, I think the advice is really clear. And I'm sure that staff won't have gone through that very lightly. There is a difference in the way that sometimes things appear on the book and how things might perceive, and, you know, people might think that they should be one way, but they're actually not when it comes to the processes and things that council have to go by. Yes, tidy would be nice, but actually lower rates would be even better.
Okay, so I note the comments in the report. I note the comments from staff. I note the matters that have been raised in debate. This seems to me to be an entirely sensible way of closing out an outstanding matter. This is about a mechanism. This isn't the opportunity to relitigate or re-debate the issues that got us to the point that we've got to. There will be some lessons to be learned from this project. There will be a closeout report which will come to this committee, and there will be plenty of opportunity to debate that report, and also to consider what recommendations might come out of it and to learn from the report at that time. And I don't doubt that a number of the matters that have been raised today will be raised in much more detail in that report and the associated debate at that time. But for now, I'll put this motion. All those in favour say aye. Against?
No.
That's carried.
Can I call
so
a division
those against
for that, please?
A division, yes,
Yeah,
we will
thanks.
take a division.
Councillor Templeton. Aye. Councillor McClellan. Aye. Councillor McDonald.
No.
Councillor Johansson. Yes. Councillor Galloway. Yes. Councillor Daniels.
Aye.
Councillor Coker.
Yes.
Councillor Cheaton.
Yes.
The Mayor.
Yes.
Councillor Major. No. Councillor Kewen. No. Councillor Goff.
No.
Councillor Davidson. Aye. Councillor Chu.
No.
Councillor Turner.
Yes.
It's 10 in favour, 5 against.
10 in favour, 5 against, so that's carried. Thank you. So now moving to item 12, development contributions, existing use credits in the central city.
We're breaking? Are we breaking at all?
We'll go through till the end. I'm not anticipating this is going to take a huge amount of time, so we'll just continue till we get to the end.
Thanks, Andrew. And Councillor, you know myself and Gavin Thomas. So just to briefly explain the context of this paper, and then I'll talk to a suggested amendment to the 1D. The purpose of this paper is to respond to a request from councillors to bring back an option to effectively retain development contribution credits as they apply for the central city. The mechanism for doing so is proposed in the paper to remit where an application is used for a DC. So it would apply in situations where development is occurring. We wouldn't remit unless a development is occurring. The proposal in the paper addresses the issue that we will start to experience probably after February next year, which is 10 years from demolition. DC credits will start to expire, and that will apply across the city. The exact date that any DC credit expires, we will only know if an application is used for those credits, but it will be 10 years from the dates of demolition, which probably won't start before February next year. And I'd just remind councillors that this is a specific proposal as it relates to expiry of DC credits. We have a wider piece of work which is about the DC policy, and the DC policy is the permanent mechanism for picking up whether or not the current setting in the DC policy of a 10-year time limit is the setting that you want to maintain going forward. You can make a variety of choices there. We've had a lot of workshops on that. We've got another workshop on the 27th of October, and then we'll be bringing the DC policy to this committee for approval for public consultation that will run in parallel with the LTP. The reason for that is because the financial settings in the DC policy are contingent on the capital program, and so it's prudent to wait now for another 2 months until we've got the draft capital program and then get the calibrations right about what the appropriate DC settings are through a DC policy, which will then be approved either in parallel or immediately thereafter the LTP in the middle of next year. So we would suggest an addition which is highlighted up there, which I can't actually read, but I suspect says puts an end date to the remissions by the 30th of June 2021.
So we've got paragraph D, remissions are only available until the council reviews and adopts the development contributions policy, or 30th of June 2021, whichever is earlier.
Yeah. Gavin, are I happy to answer any questions? Or?
All right. So just referring to the section of the report, Leanne, sorry. Yeah. The part of the report, paragraphs 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, that refers to why have this apply to the central city only, I'm finding it very difficult to see, even within those paragraphs, why we wouldn't say that there are some suburban areas, probably those which have been subject to council master planning, and there are some obvious ones, that this could apply to, and possibly should apply to, in the same way. So I'm thinking of New Brighton, Sydenham, Littleton, areas that were devastated by the earthquakes, where there's significant rebuilding to do, and where an existing credit would have some value in what are difficult development economic situations in some of those suburban areas as they are in the city. So why are you not recommending that we would do this in some of those suburban areas as well?
So we have addressed that option in the report. Just to reiterate, the likely period that this would apply is from 10 years from a demolition. So depending on which earthquake triggered resulting demolition, either the September 2010 or February 2011 earthquakes, the likely time period for the expiry of credits for the most part is from February 2021 onwards. If you take that as the date where the building was either demolished or demolition occurred at the very earliest. So the time period is relatively narrow that this would apply to. The other principal issue is the proposed remission applies to DC credits or existing use credits, and they're applicable where a high level of existing use credits exist, and for the most part that would apply for central city sites, and where a high level of credits are required for any future development. So in the absence of existing use credits, it defaults back to 1 Huey per title. So if you're building a residential property or a commercial property that only requires 1 Huey for its DCs, and existing use credits apply on that site, doesn't matter where it is, then when redeveloped, those credits basically disappear. They're not required for that site, and they're not transferable to any other site. So the likely application of credits is where there's a level of intensification typically seen in the central city, and where there has historically been a level of intensification where the DCs were paid for, and as a result a credit exists, which again is in the central city. But it's a genuine option for council, and it's also something that I know know that we've talked about informally in terms of the DC policy is about the application of the DC policy in any remissions or other mechanisms such as rebates outside the central city.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm indicating through the question that I probably would be happy to see this applied more widely than the central city. There would be examples in suburban areas, I'm sure, of where there would be, you know, maybe there was a single-storey 50 square metre shop on a site that for sensible development economics reasons now needs to be developed as a 2 or 3 storey site, maybe with some residential upstairs. Sydenham, Littleton would be great examples of where that's a likely outcome. I think there would be some common sense in saying the development is, well, we could even say citywide, actually. And then it means that should anybody put something forward between, say, February 21 and June 21, it's covered by this. I don't think we want to be restricting development in any part of the city, particularly those badly damaged, earthquake-ravaged areas. So maybe if I can indicate that I'd be happy to move this, but with that additional wording.
Yes, so we'd probably just change 1A then, that
yep.
The development is district-wide.
Just delete 1A.
Yeah.
If we take A out, it means it's citywide.
Yeah.
All right, let's do that. So I'm indicating I'll move this. Tim, you're indicating you'll second. That's great. Let's keep with questions for the moment. Leanne.
All done.
Right.
That was
and
it.
James,
So you've
well?
captured it all, and that's fine.
All right, excellent. Anne.
Thank you. Thank you. Further to that, we've got a Sockburn service centre sitting there. Does this apply to council land and buildings?
It applies to all land and buildings. So,
right. So we have an opportunity here, maybe.
Well, the council, if it redeveloped that site, would get credits based on the demand that the building that is there placed on council infrastructure.
Right. So is that worth a conversation going forward, or is it not a possibility?
Credits aren't transferable, so as Gavin says, it's what's there is there, and it will remain there 10 years from demolition. But the credits would apply to that site, so it depends on what the any future development of that site is that DC credits could apply to.
Okay.
But there are other examples around where the council and any other developer has existing use credits and has a firm plan for development, and then those credits come into play.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Phil.
So thanks. With now it's for the whole city, now isn't it? So if you had something which was demolished before the earthquakes, what in the past, how long could you carry them on for?
10 years.
It was only 10 years anyway,
yeah.
so it just, okay.
10 years is the provision in the policy.
Right, so really it's just tidying up.
Well, it's tidying it up in as much as it's tiding over until you get to reconsider this issue through the policy review process.
Mm-hmm. So if I had a building that was demolished in, say, Sockburn 15 years ago, I couldn't carry that forward. It never could have.
No. What you would have is one household unit equivalent, which is the minimum that any previously developed property would have.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yanni.
Yeah, I was trying to understand in terms of the financial impact. So do we have any sense of the financial impact?
Not really, particularly for the central city option, because we just simply don't know when and what development will happen. So it's just based on between now and the 30th of June or earlier, what development happens on what site and to what degree would they normally have had to pay DCs. So the reality is this will affect very few developments, but for those that it does affect, it gives them some certainty until the council can make its decision about a longer term solution, if that's where you want to go.
And I was just interested whether people with these sites can actually apply for an existing use rights, or whether if there's any other mechanism by which they can extend their eligibility on a case-by-case basis rather than us passing this as a policy.
No, what this is asking you to do is to use the remission provision within the policy for this purpose. So it's very much using, in an innovative way if you like, a provision we already have to fill this gap until we get to the reviewed policy. But property owners normally will only know what credits they have on their property when they come to the council and say, I want to redevelop this land, this is what I want to do, at which point we'll say, well, we need to look at what you have in previous use credits, and they'll do an assessment of that site. So, and this is a residential site where it's just one household unit equivalent, but if it's a non-residential previous use, it needs to be assessed by our DC assessors to ascertain that demand.
Right. And I'm just wondering, the other question is, I'm wondering why we've done previous things of this in public excluded, and we're doing this one in public.
There's nothing commercially sensitive or a reason for this to be in PX.
Right.
Any PX in the past would have been done for a specific development and would have gone into some detail about it. This has no specificity about it.
Do we need to do anything to make this consistent with previous decisions made for specific cases, e.g. rule them out of eligibility in this because they've got a separate agreement?
No, this provision here will sit quite separate from anything that's happened in the past.
Yeah, I guess what I was concerned about is if we make it citywide,
yeah,
we'll have possibly people coming, and we don't know the quantum of that. But one or two significant developers could actually put a huge call on this fund.
They could, but I would think that would be highly unlikely because firstly they would have had their building demolished immediately after the September quake or the February quake, and you know there are instances of that, we know, and we're just taking a belts and braces approach with this, but it would be very unlikely for developers to be able to take advantage of this in a way that they wouldn't have been able to anyway.
Yeah, I guess the final question from me was, I was just wondering in terms of the DC assessment, because it's such a short time between, February and June, so whether or not there was any mechanism by which when we do the assessment, the payment of them is delayed until we've resolved the policy. So I guess what I'm worried about is if we adopt this today, it's a bit like the other DC's one. It sets a precedent,
yeah,
and then when we come to review it, we actually are stuck with an expectation that it will exist. So I'm just trying to understand if there's any other mechanism that would enable, just for those few months, the existing credits to apply without adopting this framework.
We looked at how we could do that and how, because initially we thought we'd be able to do this by way of a practice note. And we looked at that and found that we didn't have the delegation to operate outside the provisions of the policy. So that's why we're using this approach, which does use a provision in the policy, rather than trying to invent a new policy provision, given that you're currently in the process of reviewing that policy.
And noting that this is time limited to the 30th of June, assuming this passes the way that it's on the table, and by the time this comes to an end, we will have a new policy position, which we will have worked out. There's certainly nothing about this that suggests that the new policy position would necessarily continue it or would necessarily not continue it. That'll be a matter for the policy debate. All right, are there any further questions? All right, so this has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate? James.
shouldn't go early if I've learned anything here, but I don't think this is too controversial. Look, this isn't a handout or a mission, and I think that's something that people need to bear in mind. It just recognises that a DC has already been paid for the site. And I think what's really critical is that you have to frame this in light of the post-earthquake or post-disaster environment that we find ourselves in, which is somewhat unique, to say the least. So the removal of the original 1A, I think, is entirely appropriate because the earthquake, didn't discriminate against areas or central cities versus suburban areas. It affected all of Christchurch, so applying it citywide, I think, is appropriate. And the last point that I want to make on this is fundamentally, this just keeps us in a short-term holding pattern until the wider policy is adopted. And although there is a time frame associated with it, we're never going to get to that 2021 date because the policy is likely to be adopted in front of us within a matter of months. So I think it makes complete sense, and I hope you all support it.
Thank you. Tim.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really pleased that it's going citywide. I think we've got some of the smaller key activity areas that really need stimulus. And if we're talking about morale in the city, etc., to go through your local shops and there are gaps and they're still kind of looking pretty shabby, and then you have one new building surrounded by kind of vacant sites which look really shocking. I think this hopefully will give stimulus to those in those community and those smaller key activity areas to get going. So I think it's a really good change, a really good addition, and I hope you support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, certainly realising that there was an exceptional level of demolition, most of which was completely unexpected and wouldn't have happened as a result of the earthquakes, and realising that all across the city there are a number of vacant sites that remain vacant and haven't been redeveloped, perhaps as quickly as we might have expected. Realising that demand and development economics have played a big role in the reasons that those sites haven't been developed, and that's relative to the city centre and to a number of suburban areas which are very obvious as we move around the city. But also realising that we will be reviewing the policy, as has been noted, within the short term. This is a stopgap. It is one that almost certainly won't affect very many properties. But for the properties that it does affect, it will make a difference. It could well be the difference between building a building on the site being economically viable or not, and that, in fact, may result in either a building being built where a building otherwise perhaps wouldn't have been built. The application of this citywide is something I think is absolutely the right thing to do. As you move around the city and you look at areas like Stanmore Road or Beckenham or New Brighton or Sydenham or Littleton, you see suburban areas that were previously vibrant, where there are still vacant sites, and in many cases vacant sites where there may not be a lot of prospect of significant development in the near future. But anything we can do to assist with that is important, and this is one way that we can assist with that. So I support this, and I certainly support it being applied citywide. The policy is currently the city centre, so this actually extends the policy to a citywide position, which is something I'm hoping that there'll be support for as we pass this today. Thank you. Yanni.
I can't support this today. I think we need to be really careful. What we're doing is effectively saying to people, you can sit on your land longer and you will still get the credits in the future. So I think to say that somehow this is going to be enabling of development is not quite the right way to phrase it. I mean, I get why people are saying between when they expire and when they the policy gets reviewed that there is an opportunity in there that might make things a bit more economically viable. But fundamentally, extending the time frame gives people a longer time frame with which they can actually sit on land that hasn't been developed. And so that does concern me. But actually, in my view, just we're giving away a blank cheque, and I don't like that. I'd much rather see on a case-by-case basis, if people have got a proposal and they don't qualify because they've been out of the time, then I'd rather that come back to us with the financial quantum that will be impacting on our budgets. And I know that this is rates funded borrowing, but this is actually money that we've already put aside, and I appreciate that. But I still think, given the impact that one or two big developments could have on this funding, that it would be much better for us at a governance level to see the proposal, understand the financial impact, and then make a decision. So I'm not happy with just putting in a blank check across the city. There's councillors who weren't on this council, and there's councillors who were on this council when we've previously discussed a similar issue, and the quantum of that is very, very significant. So I just can't support the approach that we're being asked to take today. I think there's a better way to do it, which is the way we did it in the past, and I'd much prefer that approach. But I think the other key thing is to get that policy in place as soon as possible.
Leanne.
I'll just follow up on that and just remind people that previous use credits attach to the site. So the development contributions have already been paid. They expire 10 years after the demolition of a previous development on the site. So 10 years, okay, most of the buildings in the central city were covered by the February earthquake or led to their demolition. They weren't demolished at the time of the earthquakes necessarily. Many of them were demolished after the earthquakes. And the claiming of the development credits, contributions that were already paid, it's a short window, and it's up until the end of June next year, when the development contributions policy is adopted. I actually think that this puts pressure on us to adopt the development contributions policy, and I think we should. I think we should have that pressure put on us to do that. It's an important policy, and it's an important mechanism for recognising the actual cost of the infrastructure that relates to the particular development. And I'm afraid in the central city, when we're looking at the extent of the work that's already been done on the infrastructure and the incredible amenity that sits within the central city as well, I think that it is something that we do need to review. So just allowing for this window of time for a small one, I don't think has the concerns that Yanni has expressed. It's a relatively short period of time, but just gives some people some certainty that that will be the case until the development contributions policy is in place or the end of the financial year.
Thank you. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? So just Yanni against. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of the agenda, so I'll now close the meeting. Tukuna te wairua kia rere te taumata. Ko te matatika te matapono hei arahi ina mahi. Ko arotahi te tira kia ere panaku. Kia eke tangaroa. Homie, huie, taikie. Thank you.